back. Today we're going to talk about how documents such as the Mayflower Compact and other early governing documents have influenced our American government. So let's get to it. So early foundations. Now, the first three documents that we talk about with this video are going to be British governing documents, okay? And you say, actually, Mrs. Petty, this is American government. Well, you're right. But because we were so politically connected with Great Britain for so many years, it's no wonder that the British governing documents have heavily influenced our American democracy. So two ideas that we get from British governing documents, or that we created as a result of our experience with Great Britain, is that we want the government to be limited in power. Now, this is probably going to be the easiest definition that you ever have to remember ever in your life, okay? Limited government. This is government that is limited in power. There's really no other way to say that, okay? So there are certain things that our government cannot do. According to our Constitution, they cannot take away your freedom to petition the government. They can't take away your freedom of speech without due process, of course. Our founding fathers also wanted to create a representative government, okay? Now, if you can think back to what we talked about in a few videos ago, we talked about an indirect democracy. We said an indirect democracy was very similar, well, was what we have today, and we also call that a republic. So a representative government is, I mean, the definition is pretty close to republic. This is a government in which the people elect delegates to vote on their behalf, okay? So we elect members of our government to make decisions for us. All right, so moving on then to the Magna Carta. This is the first of those really important governing documents, and I don't really require you to remember a lot of dates in our class, but this is one of those dates that I really think you should remember, okay? So the Magna Carta, this is also called the Great Charter, was signed in 1215. By a guy named King John. Now, King John was actually the younger brother of Richard the Lionhearted, okay? Richard the Lionhearted went off on a crusade. He doesn't make it back in one piece. And then we've got King John who takes over, okay? So King John is known throughout British history as kind of like a really greedy, not really a very moral or scrupulous king. So he jacks up the tax rate on the citizens, and he uses it to line his own pockets, okay? Think to the Disney cartoon Robin Hood. Prince John from that movie pretty accurately portrays the actual King John. So King John is actually forced to sign this document known as the Magna Carta. And it's a really important document because it's the first to actually limit the power of a monarch. Okay, so in 1215, this is where we kind of see England moving a little bit more towards the constitutional monarchy as opposed to an absolute monarchy. Okay, now the Petition of Right is signed quite a few years later. In 1628, the Petition of Right was signed by Charles I. Charles I, he eventually is executed. He's beheaded because of, well, he and his constituents didn't really get along that well, and we'll talk about that in another class. But Charles I signed the Petition of Right. Again, he didn't do this willingly. And the important thing about that document is that it prevented the king from acting without Parliament's consent. So acting on things like increasing taxes, sending the military into homes, quartering troops, that kind of stuff. So it really just, again, emphasized that relationship between the leader and with the legislative branch, trying to limit that power. All right, so next we have the English Bill of Rights. Now this document was signed by William and Mary, and England was in a little bit of a pickle at that time because they were without a king, okay? James II, who was the great-grandson of Charles I, he actually had fled, okay? He just ran away and he was hiding out in France. Mary was actually his daughter. So Parliament goes to her and says, hey, you want to come, I don't know, be our queen? And she says, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm going to bring my husband with me, and he's going to rule jointly with me as king. So William and Mary signed the English Bill of Rights, which was going to protect the rights of the citizens from an overbearing or from power-hungry monarchs. Okay, so again, this document limits the power of a monarch. So the English Bill of Rights protects the rights of the people. Things like cruel and unusual punishment, excessive fines, and bail. Those were specific components of the English Bill of Rights. And by signing that, William and Mary were saying, you know what, you're right. We're not going to do that kind of stuff to our people because that's not cool. And cruel and unusual punishment and excessive fines and bail, that's part of our Eighth Amendment. So that's something we take directly from the English Bill of Rights. Some other early constitutions and legal codes that we want to look at. The Mayflower Compact. This is something that we'll spend some time in dual credit classes if you take those with me. The Mayflower Compact was the first document, written constitution, I guess you could say, in the New World that established a system of representative government. Okay, so people are coming over on the Mayflower. They say, you know what? We need to come up with a governing body. So all of the men who were on the Mayflower signed this document saying, yeah, we agree that we're going to be governed. We agree that we're going to elect a governor and all that kind of stuff comes from the Mayflower Compact. We also have these two documents, the General Fundamentals. This was utilized in the early 1600s. And it emphasized the importance of equal protection for everybody. So it doesn't matter who you are, who your parents are, doesn't matter any of that. You have to be treated equally under the law. And it also tells us that you're going to elect your own officials. So you're not just going to have somebody randomly thrown in from England to lead everything. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, also a 1600s document. This one dealt specifically with denying the use of religious tests to allow someone to vote. So this is where we get the idea of freedom of religion, or that wall of separation between church and state. And that's all for today. Let me know if you have any questions.